Ran has been up for a minute. As the kids say, he's still got his church clothes on, so he is ready to go, looking fresh as a daisy.
Look how this guy left me, man.
Day one of the NFL draft is in the books. And first overall pick, Cam Ward, not a surprise. After that, things got crazy right quick, right? Because at number 2, the Jacksonville Jaguars made their way up from 5, swap picks with the Cleveland Browns to take Travis Hunter. You had heard that was going to be a possibility earlier in the day, and that was a fun development to see it unfold in real time. The Jaguars received that second overall pick, the 104th pick, which is a 4th-round pick, and a 6th-round pick as well. And the Browns get the 5th pick, move down, take Mason Graham. They also get the 36th pick, so they're going to have 2 picks pretty early on in day 2, which is just a few hours from now. And they get a 2026 first-round pick. So they are stockpiling picks there. But before we talk about the Browns here, let's talk about the Jaguars. And first up, Travis Hunter's reaction to going to Jacksonville.
It was super exciting. You know, my family was super excited. And, you know, I always had that small belief that I would be in Jacksonville, but I didn't know for sure until tonight. So I was definitely excited and surprised a little bit. I just did my best, Duval, back there, but I got you. Duval!
So I think his Duval was a little better than Liam Cohen's Duval.
Way better. And we need to get Liam Cohen a Duval coordinator to help him. He needs another shot at it.
Well, I tell you what, his life is now made a lot easier with the addition of Travis Hunter. And we've talked about this. They had Brian Thomas Jr., their home run first-round pick from a year ago. They wanted to get Trevor Lawrence some help. They did sign De'Ami Brown. They have Parker Washington out of Penn State in the slot. But Travis Hunter feels like his role is going to be wide receiver first, and then maybe some DB. Does that feel about right in terms of trading up from 5 to 2 and give a first-round pick in the future for a player like Travis?
Yeah, and I think that's the perfect fit. And especially, we have to keep in mind Liam Cohen, an offensive-minded head coach in his first year as the head coach, is going to call the plays. So out the gate, you want to arm him with as much as possible to bring his expertise to the forefront. So playing Travis early at wide receiver makes sense, and then you could package him in on defense, and I'm sure the defensive coordinator and the DB coach are going to be fighting to get him out there on the field. But you love it for Travis. He's a Florida kid. Now you're bringing him home to Florida to help come play for the one of the teams in the state, and it should be a good situation for him.
So James Gladstone, the 34-year-old first-year GM in Jacksonville, moves up 4 spots and gives up a future first. That feels incredibly rich for something not a quarterback. But Travis is literally a 2-for-1 type of player and the number 1 player on my big board, and it's not controversial to say that the best player in this draft. Is that too much to go up and get Travis?
Man, F them picks.
And where
that's the school of thought that James comes from.
And where does James come from?
He comes from the Rams, LA. He was LA. He's a St. Louis kid, but he came up under Les Snead, worked probably as close with Les Snead as anyone. And this is what James does. James is a process and systems guy. And so he understands the values of these players. And so he would have no problem trading future picks to get that one guy that he knows is going to come in and make a difference for him.
And by the way, a few years ago, Houston took C.J. Stroud second, traded way back up and gave up a lot at the time to come back and get Will Anderson at number 3, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
No one has said a word about how much they gave up at the time because Will Anderson's been balling out ever since.
You got 2 Pro Bowl players in back-to-back picks, and that was a home run draft for D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio coming out of, D'Amico's first draft as a head coach.
Speaking of home runs, it feels like, you don't want to jinx Browns fans because they've been through a lot, but it feels like Andrew Berry hit a home run. They come off of Travis. Travis makes every team better, but the Browns aren't 1 player away. They go to number 5, get all the picks we just talked about. And then they get Mason Graham, who we've had going number 5, usually the Jacksonville Jaguars, paired next to Myles Garrett, in addition to that first-round pick. In addition to picks 33 and 36 now, they can get a lot better very quickly. Quarterback situation they still have to sort out, but if they don't like a quarterback in this class, it's hard to quibble with what they've done.
No, and you look at it, and the way we've talked about this draft class as a whole, looking more like the bell curve.
Yep.
Right? So thin with top-tier talent in the front, but heavy in the middle. And now Andrew and the Cleveland Browns are equipped with 4 picks in the top 100 left.
Yep.
Like, that is a lot. And so you're saying they're going to walk out of this draft with 5 top 100 picks in a draft that's heavy in the middle. And so they're going to be well equipped. Now, they still have to pick the right people.
Yeah.
And those guys got to stay healthy, and all those things will work itself out. But now they're equipped to have that many at-bats and have a chance at it. And you get a first-round pick next year. And depending on how Jacksonville plays, we don't know where that's going to go, and we don't know where where Cleveland is going to be if they don't figure out their quarterback situation. And then next year's draft class, which I know we'll get to, we probably got a mock draft coming tonight when we're done here. You have a chance. That class is set to be deep next year, and so they'll have multiple shots at getting a quarterback right next year if they choose to.
So Cleveland has, I mentioned, 33 and 36, and they have 67 and 94. Later in the show, we'll talk about the best player available going forward, and we'll talk about some possible landing spots, who they might target at 33 and 36. But let me ask you this, because you mentioned a couple times that maybe Cleveland's looking towards next year's draft class, which right now appears to be deep at quarterback. You talk to some folks, and they're like, well, you can't look that far ahead. But it sounds like if you don't love what's in this draft class quarterback-wise, and I'll find the stat, but typically when 2 or fewer quarterbacks go in round 1 in the last 10 years, the results have been hard to look at. So maybe you understand that, and maybe you say it can't get worse, or maybe, let me ask you this. Are you having conversations as the GM with scouts about next year's draft class, like at this point in the conversation?
Well, if you know anything about Andrew Berry, the name of his game is preparation. And so I'm pretty sure that Andrew has forecasted and has an outlook of what next year's draft class is going to look like.
Okay.
And if you look on their website, they have the biggest analytics department in all of business. Right. I think they have probably a bigger analytic departments than some Fortune 500 companies. So I'm pretty sure he's had those guys forecast what the future is going to be and what it's going to look like for him. Okay.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense when you put it that way. Fewest quarterbacks drafted in the first round in the last 20 years. 2022, Kenny Pickett went. E.J. Manuel in 2013. This year's Cam and Jaxson Dart, who we'll talk about, who was drafted by the Giants, who traded back up into the first round. 2015 was Jameis and Marcus Mariota. 2010, Sam Bradford. You were on staff when he was with St. Louis and L.A., and Tim Tebow was in that draft class. And I'll go through these, and then I'll circle back as to why. 2008 was Matt Ryan and Joe Flacco, and then 2007, the year before that, Jamarcus Russell and Brady Quinn. Of those names I've mentioned, only the 2008 draft class, Matt Ryan and Joe Flacco, worked out in terms of both quarterbacks being guys that you could look to as franchise quarterbacks. Matt Ryan went to the Super Bowl and almost won it. Joe Flacco did win a Super Bowl. The others gives you some pause, and maybe that's the math, at least to begin, that Andrew Berry was doing when he decided to do what he did.
I mean, that's a hell of a rundown, and it becomes scary.
Right.
If you look at it, if you look at the history of it being that way. I was in Atlanta in 2008 with Matt Ryan as a rookie, and Matt, he completely balled out as a rookie and continued to do so and became an NFL MVP. And like you said, Joe Flacco, who is still playing, the old man Flacco.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right.
He went to a Super Bowl and won. And so it's alarming, something to see. But when you have a guy, and I'll say like a Cam Ward that you take at 1, and you know how this guy's intrinsically motivated.
Right.
Like I think this draft class will be the one outlier probably to that, to kind of go along more like the 2008 class.
And again, 2 quarterbacks went in the first round. One of them was not the same Shedeur Sanders. We'll talk about that in a second. What about Mason Graham's impact next to Myles Garrett? I posed to you earlier, does Mason Graham look more attractive next to Myles Garrett than Abdul Carter as a bookend? And you said no. But this is not a bad consolation prize given the draft capital as well, right?
No, and again, you get a player that's clean, right? It's a clean pick. And then you always want to err on the side of, when you're taking a guy in the top 10, you want to err on the side of getting the most clean and the most surefire guy that you can get. Now, we're talking about it from the text of him being next to Myles Garrett, and I don't really see Mason Graham as a top-tier pass rusher. Maybe being next to a Myles Garrett to give him more opportunities in one-on-one situations where he's not the focal point, and then he'll learn how to win. But coming out, that's not his strong suit. His strong suit is being able to attack and be disruptive and create those tackles for loss, which now allows Myles Garrett to pin his ears back, and that's what Jim Schwartz's defense is. It's about attacking. It's tackling the running back on the way to the quarterback.
And you mentioned Mason Graham, his teammate and running mate, Kenneth Grant, was drafted pick 13 with the Miami Dolphins. So those 2 young men wreaked a lot of havoc last year in Ann Arbor, and now they're going to be doing it at the next level. All right. This isn't, nothing's a surprise at this point except for a few things. But we've talked a lot about Ashton and Jeanty potentially landing with the Raiders. Down the stretch, I thought they would go offensive line there. Instead, they did, in fact, go with Ashton and Jeanty. Fifth first-round pick in Boise State history, first ever in the top 10. The last, I believe, was Leighton Vander Esch, the linebacker, back in 2018. And Las Vegas last in the NFL in rushing yards per game last season, and yards per rush at 3.6 last year, which is it's criminal. Like, I don't even know how you explain that. Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly, Tom Brady, Eugene Cyril Smith III, Brock Bowers is coming back in year 2, and now you have Ashton Jeanty. Yes, they have huge needs on defense. Yes, they need wide receivers. But I would imagine you feel okay with Ashton Jeanty at 6?
Yeah, I feel okay with it, and that's a good fit for him, especially in Chip's offense and the way he's going to want to run downhill and attack, especially in the shotgun run game. So I understand the pick, and we talked about, or you just talked about that their defense still needs some help.
Yeah.
Well, now you add a running game, which is going to allow them to possess the ball a little bit longer, hopefully, and the defense won't have to be out there on the field as much.
So they'll pick at pick 37. And we'll have the conversation as we get around to the topic of Shedeur Sanders, where he ends up. And, we didn't even talk about this, but he has a relationship with Tom Brady. And for the longest time, from January to maybe the Combine, we thought, well, maybe that'll be a landing spot because of that relationship. Geno Smith trade happened. They pick at pick 68 as well. And I'm thinking about in terms of the guys they could address defensively more so than quarterback. But those will be some things we'll talk about as we get through this process over the next 2 days here. Colston Loveland, first tight end off the board, went 10 to Chicago, and then Tyler Warren went 14th to Indianapolis. And we thought that certainly Indianapolis would target a tight end. Chicago is a little more interesting, but you made a point about Ben Johnson and running one running back, 2 tight end sets. So in that sense, Loveland makes some sense. Do you feel like Tyler would have been a better Sam Laporta type fit, or is Colston Loveland certainly good enough for what Ben Johnson wants to do?
No, he's definitely good enough, and I think he probably mirrors more Sam Laporta genre than Tyler Warren did. See, I saw Tyler Warren as a 3-down wide tight end, a guy that you can put his hand in the dirt, and he could block for you. He could block those 5, those 6, those 7, and those wide 9 techniques, but he can also be a factor for you in the passing game. Whereas Loveland, to me, was the F tight end, the move tight end, the athletic tight end that can play in the slot. They can create some of those mismatches with linebackers and safeties. And so he fits more of that athletic move role that is in Ben Johnson's offense than Tyler Warren did.
Yeah, and I asked you this yesterday now, on Thursday, hours before the draft, about the embarrassment of riches, if you will, for Indianapolis, and that they have Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, Josh Downs. And I said, do they need a tight end? And you said, walk down the hall at the facility and see number 44, your former teammate, Dallas Clark.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you just take a walk down that hallway, and I'm pretty sure there's a picture there that features Brandon Stokely, Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, Edgerrin James in the backfield, and Dallas Clark at tight end with Peyton throwing those guys the ball. Now, here's the thing. You can mimic, and I'm not saying that their group is this because we're talking about 3 Hall of Famers that you're throwing to, right?
Yeah.
But their biggest issue isn't going to be able to have those weapons. It's finding that Peyton Manning and who that quarterback is going to be that's going to distribute the ball. So I think that's the part that they now need to figure out.
Right. And Anthony Richardson does a lot of things, but he is yet to be confused with Peyton Manning. Maybe that's somewhere down the road, but certainly not there yet. The Buccaneers. This is interesting. Producer Striker's a Bucs fan, so I'm surprised this wasn't at the top of the rundown. Take Emeka Egbuka with every cornerback still on the board. And it's funny because the Bucs fans we work with didn't think wide receiver was the biggest need, but you'd heard that wide receiver was certainly something they were very interested in Tampa Bay. We both love Emeka Egbuka for the professional way he plays the position and how he's even underrated among all the Ohio State wide receivers that have come out in recent drafts. Why not take a cornerback here if you're Todd Bowles?
Well, again, we talked about it. We just talked about the fit for Egbuka here, but it was more of a fit because of Chris Godwin and his future. Yep. And I told you, Mike Evans gets all the accolades. He gets all the attention, and as he should because of the consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. But that Chris Godwin role in that offense is huge for them and what they want to do. And it's just more than being able to get those dirty yards and extend drives. But we're talking about a receiver that you can bring in motion, insert in on linebackers and safeties coming down and helping the run game. And that role is critical for them. And with Chris Godwin still being out with a dislocated ankle, you don't know when he's going to come back and how well he's going to come back from it at his current age. So why not address that now and get a young player that can fill that role, because I'm pretty sure it's hard for them to find a receiver that can do all those things that they want in that Chris Godwin role, and Emeka can fill that role nicely.
I'm glad you brought up the blocking, because he does that at a very high level, and we have not talked, at least I haven't, enough about that. Hey, Stryker, you okay with that explanation? You feel better or no?
Yeah, I feel better now. All good.
There you
go. I just had to let it out for a little bit, but I could be talked into it.
Yeah, and you weren't alone among our coworkers who are Bucs fans, because they had the same questions you do. And I'll check in a moment. But there's opportunities, especially now when we'll look later in the show about the best player available. There are a lot of cornerbacks that are going to be available on day 2 that the Buccaneers can target.
It's about to be a nice run here on corners. And if I'm going to equate it to something, it reminds me going into day 2 like we did last year in day 2 when there was a run on D tackles early.
Exactly.
And so I think we're going to, on the flip side this year, is going to be a run on those corners pretty early.
Did you have to trade it for Tavondre? Because I think the Falcons traded for Rook Ororo, if I recall correctly.
And we stayed pat and got Sweat at 38.
Okay.
And then the Rams came up and took Braden Fisk.
That's right. So the Buccaneers picked 50.
Oh, and also, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. And then Washington came up and got
the guy who had the foot injury.
Newton.
Exactly. Johnny Newton. Thank you. That's right. Yeah, he had the foot injury. He could have been a first-round pick for sure as well. As could have Tavondre Sweat. Tampa Bay picks 53 in the second round tomorrow. And are you making phone calls if you're Jason Light about potentially moving up for a Will Johnson or a Suvone Revel? Or are you going to just sit pat and see how the first 5 or 6 picks come off the board?
You got to feel, and obviously this is speculation, but if you're sitting at 53 and we know there's going to be an early run on corners, you got a quarterback sitting there, you got a couple receivers that are still there, and you still have some running backs that can go, pretty early. A guy like Suvone Revel could still be facing you there at 53, considering his injury and him coming off of the ACL. Right. And so I could see that being a guy that will fit at Todd Bowles' system that can get in your face. His game's kind of similar to Jamel Dean.
Yeah.
And now you'll have 2 big, long, physical press corners that can get in your face, turn and run, and those guys are being able to fit in the run game. So they may be staring him in the face at 53, and I'm pretty sure they could take him off the board.
Will Johnson's still out there. Trey Amos is still out there. Suvone Revel, who we just talked about. So there will be some Benjamin Morrison that had the injury out of Notre Dame, who's a good player when he's healthy. So we'll see how that unfolds, Stryker. So hold on to your hats, as my grandma would say. Next up, I want to spend exactly 1 second on this. Steelers pass on Shedeur Sanders for Derek Harmon. As a Steelers fan, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I speak for me and certainly for our colleague Brian McFadden, 2-time Super Bowl champ with the Pittsburgh Steelers. We both thought Shedeur made sense at 21. You've talked about that for certainly weeks now. And BMAC's response to the development of Derek Harmon going there, not because this is anything about Derek Harmon, but it's more about the lack of quarterbacks in the quarterback room in Pittsburgh, is what are we doing? And I had a similar question. We talked about this on CBS Sports HQ. Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle out of Michigan, makes a ton of sense there. We heard that they liked him there. Derek Harmon, I talked to a couple of teams, not in Pittsburgh, who were concerned about the injuries and thought he may fall. Clearly, Pittsburgh felt differently. And let's start there. We'll talk about Shedeur in a second. But how much variation can there be in medicals from one team to the next, where a couple teams are like, we're concerned that he may fall into day 2, and another team's like, well, we're going to take him at 21?
Well, you get the medical, right? You get the medical, and then like we talked about on a previous pod, that you have the medical rechecks. And so when it comes down and you have your medical meeting, you get to see the level in which every team has viewed this prospect.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And whether they see him as a risk or not, right? And so
that information, just to be clear, is available to every team as you look at the medical recheck? Is that,
yes.
Oh, okay.
And so, but here's the thing. Some teams aren't as worried about certain injuries as others are. Right. I know there was a time because it kind of ran rampant through Green Bay. You had a bunch of guys there dealing with neck injuries. So anyone that had any type of stenosis or any type of neck thing going on, Green Bay would ding them harder than most teams would. Right. So
that makes sense.
Maybe Pittsburgh obviously is comfortable, with the medical. Some of the medical information that I was able to find out or hear about, it's the guy, he'll be fine. He's a high risk guy. He's a high risk, not high risk enough for you to take him off the board, but he's a high risk for longevity.
Okay.
And to me, if you're taking a guy, no matter the need, that is going to be a high risk that you don't know is going to be able to make it to contract number 2,
right,
when you desperately need a quarterback. And again, and we can go round and round on this. No matter what you have with Aaron Rodgers is 40 years old.
Yep.
And he's not going to be there for you the next 4 years probably. So why not take a chance on a quarterback and get a guy in the first round that you'll be able to have, for sure for 5 years guaranteed, and you could bring him along.
Yeah, and again, this is not so much about Derek Harmon. It's about the injury concerns. And I'll be honest, I like Keanu Bitten. I didn't love him as a second-round pick a few years ago. He's been fantastic, and maybe Derek Harmon is going to be in that similar vein. You just want to make sure he's healthy, and then there, of course, the QB needs. And we'll talk more about Shedeur Sanders a little bit later in the show. But let's talk about another quarterback that went in the first round, not named Cam Ward. The Giants trade back in, pick 25. Houston Texans moved down, and I think the Houston Texans moved down in part because the three offensive linemen they like, Kelvin Banks, Tyler Booker, and then finally Donovan Jackson went just to pick before them, I believe, to 24 to the Minnesota Vikings. Once those three were off the board, Houston said, all right, peace out. Giants were going to come back in for a quarterback, it sounds like. Jaxson Dart sounds like it was going to be their guy for a while, and they come back and get him. I just read the list of quarterbacks with two going round one, how uneven the play has been for the second quarterback in particular. How do you like the fit of Jaxson Dart in New York? And what are the realistic expectations in the quarterback room that now includes Russ Wilson, Jameis Winston, and Tommy DeVito?
I mean, it fits a Brian Daboll system. A guy that's mobile, a guy that can move around, a guy that can extend and make plays down the field. I still don't think he's going to start year one. And I think he's going to be, now, again, and we talked about this on CBS Sports HQ, will he be the backup and you have Jameis as the emergency third, understanding what you have? Or do you take a guy at 25 and he's your emergency third? I think we can rewind a little bit here. You have to give GM Joe Schoen some credit here because him taking the chance and going out and signing Russell Wilson put them in a position where they did not have to take a quarterback as early as they did, and it put them in a situation. So kudos to Joe for making that move, because not only did it put a quarterback in that room for them, but it gives them the ability to sit a young guy, and then you have a veteran quarterback that for sure can get you through 1 year, and hopefully for them, if speculation is true, help save those guys' jobs, and they'll be around in time to see the development of Jaxson Dart.
So this is a talking point in the media. Let me know if this is a talking point in draft rooms or in draft meetings prior to the actual draft. Any concerns about wide receivers and quarterbacks coming out of the Lane Kiffin's system at Ole Miss because there's been a spotty track record in recent years?
I wouldn't say so much as the wide receivers, and I don't know that you talk about it out in the open.
Okay.
But as you're evaluating guys, then those are things that you look at. And there are a couple other programs that, because of the type of system they run, it's pretty hard to evaluate some of their players and how it's going to project into an NFL system. Now, again, Brian Daboll, and everyone forgets, Brian Daboll was a college offensive coordinator when he was the offensive coordinator at Alabama.
Right.
And so he understands how to meet some of these young quarterbacks where they are and where the pitfalls would be. So hopefully this is a pick for them that Brian Daboll can now bring his college offensive coordinator skills and his NFL coordinating skills together, and you have one of these new age quarterbacks in Jaxson Dart.
And to your previous point, the fact that Joe Schoen got those two veteran quarterbacks, and you noted this, but I think it's worth repeating, Jaxson doesn't have to play right away. And I think that's the most important development for the Giants outside of getting Abdul Carter, of course, but coming back for a quarterback, and they can be patient with that quarterback in Jaxson Dart.